Laritte is summoned by her father, Count Brumayer, who coldly informs her that she is to marry Duke Reinhardt. Silently, Laritte reflects that the moment has finally come. Her father, who has never shown her a shred of affection, is discarding her once again. From childhood, she lived in fear, dreading the punishments that came with his pristine white gloves. When she doesn't respond immediately, her father grows irritated, slams the table, and demands if she's even listening. Laritte calmly replies that she is, while internally acknowledging how deeply she has learned to surrender. Neither he nor the other person present, her half-sister, Rose Brumayer, show any remorse for sending her to ruin. Rose scornfully asks if Laritte has ever truly imagined herself as a duchess and reminds her that, as an illegitimate child, she should be grateful to their father. Laritte's steady stare unsettles Rose, though she reassures herself that Laritte, as always, will just quietly obey. But Laritte breaks the silence with a sarcastic response. Of course, she is grateful. After all, she's being given to a ruined dukedom, stripped of its assets due to treason, and the duke himself is dead on the battlefield. They've chosen a ghost for her to marry. How could she not be happy? Rose, shocked by Laritte's sarcastic remark, blurts out, "Excuse me," before bursting into laughter, only to abruptly stop, glare coldly at Laritte, and march toward her in anger. She demands to know how Laritte dares to mock her, calls her a lowly wench, and slaps her hard. Laritte, used to such treatment, glances at the nearby maids and silently acknowledges they will never help her. Not now, not ever. But with the situation already out of control, Laritte decides there's no reason to hold back anymore. She pushes Rose to the ground, shocking the maids, and climbs on top of her, striking back. Rose is stunned, and Laritte tells her she is not the lowly one. She adds that the Duke Rose once admired would be interested to know who the real violent and brutal one is. Rose, taken aback, accuses Laritte of going mad. At that moment, their father grabs Laritte by the hair, pulls her off Rose, and throws her aside. Furious, he berates Laritte, saying they fed and sheltered her, and this is how she repays them. By attacking her sister? He questions her audacity and assumes they've been too lenient with her. The maids rush to help Rose, who urges their father to beat Laritte until she can barely breathe. He agrees and steps forward. But Laritte, burning with rage, thinks silently that she won't sit back and be beaten anymore. She suddenly bites her father's leg, causing him to scream in pain. Though he yells and calls her a brat, Laritte refuses to let go, declaring no one can touch her again. After a struggle, he kicks her away, sending her crashing into the table. The maids quickly rush to tend to his wound as Rose anxiously asks if he's all right. Seeing the injury, the maids gasp in shock, calling Laritte a beast. Rising from the ground, Laritte spits out the blood she got from biting her father. On the day of her departure to her husband's house, Laritte reflects on the events that led to her marriage to Duke Reinhardt. As head of the powerful Reinhardt family, second only to the royal family, the Duke was originally meant to marry her half-sister, Rose, who had fallen for him at first sight and begged their father, Count Brumayer, for the match. Eager to please his beloved daughter, the Count arranged the engagement. However, on his return from a victorious battle, Duke Reinhardt was killed by a prisoner of war. Although his death should have ended the engagement, the greedy Count Brumayer, unwilling to return the large sum of money he had received, chose to send Laritte, the illegitimate, unwanted daughter, in Rose's place instead. The coachman informs Laritte that they've arrived and brings her luggage. As she's about to thank him, he coldly throws her belongings to the ground instead of handing them over. He acts indifferent, as if his behavior means nothing. Annoyed, Laritte crouches, picks up a stone with a faint smile, and sighs, calling this her first obstacle in a new life of freedom and independence. She throws the stone at the coachman, hitting him. He angrily calls after her, demanding to know where she's going after assaulting him, but Laritte ignores him and walks away. As she does, she reflects that to make matters worse, not long after Duke Reinhardt was killed in action, evidence surfaced accusing him of treason. Laritte arrives at a remote, rundown villa in the mountains, the only remaining property of Duke Reinhardt that wasn't confiscated. Most of the Reinhardt household staff survived, aside from a few directly implicated, but as she expected, no one is here to welcome her. She's appalled. The coachman left her alone in such a place without offering any help. Laritte reflects that if she were a typical noblewoman with no practical skills, she'd be doomed. The nearest village is a half-day's walk away. The villa is filthy, and though it's not yet night, it's already cold. Laritte lights a candle and takes a good look around the villa, feeling a light draft. Despite its worn condition, the place is large, and she feels a spark of excitement. It's her own home, entirely hers. The view outside is breathtaking, and the building itself seems sturdy. For the first time, she won't have to constantly be on guard or force herself to eat inedible food. She's no longer the helpless Laritte. This marks the beginning of her new life. There's plenty of work ahead if she wants to stay warm through winter, but if she keeps busy, spring will come soon enough. At the Brumayer house, the entire family gathers at the dining table for a meal. Rose sighs deeply, prompting her mother to ask why she's sighing so much and to remind her to mind her manners. Rose responds that she still can't believe Duke Reinhardt is truly gone. How could that even be possible? Her mother, clearly annoyed, tells her to stop bringing it up, while her father adds that since the Duke is now labeled a traitor, Rose should be more careful with her words. But Rose protests, insisting it doesn't make sense, and she can't simply forget him. She recalls the day they bumped into each other in the ballroom hallway, claiming she knew in that instant they were destined for each other. She had imagined they would finally get there happily ever after, only for him to be killed by a mere prisoner just as the battle was ending. Sighing again and returning to her food, Rose laments that she was probably the only one who could have brought out the Duke's softer side. Count Brumayer agrees it's truly disappointing. If Rose had married the Duke, the Brumayer family might have regained the status and honor they once held when the empire was founded. Countess Brumayer tells Rose that life is full of unexpected turns and, in the end, they nearly had no choice but to send her. However, thanks to the illegitimate girl, they narrowly avoided that outcome. At the mention of Laritte, Rose glances toward her father. Count Brumayer tries to steer the conversation away, saying it's all in the past. However, Countess Brumayer interrupts, continuing that no one would have expected a girl unworthy of the Brumayer name to be of any use. She mocks Laritte for taking after that vulgar dancer completely. She adds that now, thanks to Laritte, they no longer have to return the Duke's money to the royal treasury. Turning to Rose, she admits she doesn't know what her husband was thinking back then but assumes he must have had a bigger plan in mind. Count Brumayer, clearly displeased, sighs and sarcastically remarks that perhaps his wife is slower than he thought. His words shock both Rose and the Countess. Suddenly furious, he throws his wine glass to the floor and yells at the Countess, demanding how she dares to disrespect her husband when he told her to stop. Rose becomes alarmed at the shattered glass and quickly checks on her mother, only to see that a shard has cut her face. Concerned, the maids rush in to stop the bleeding, but the Countess tells them to calm down, insisting she's fine. One of the maids protests, pointing out that the injury might leave a scar. Trying to collect himself, Count Brumayer tells the Countess that her reckless words have ruined the dinner atmosphere and scolds her for not watching her mouth. He tells the maids not to overreact and to return to their duties. Silently fuming, the Countess clenches her dress in anger. Meanwhile, Rose reflects once again on how her father always becomes strange whenever Laritte is mentioned. In her eyes, the Brumayer family's peace was shattered the day that girl entered their home. She remembers when her father first brought Laritte in, bruised, covered in soot, and how she instantly noticed Laritte didn't resemble a Brumayer at all. There were no freckles, no red hair. Instead, Laritte had pale skin, shiny silver hair, and large blue eyes, features any noble girl would envy. Rose hated all of it. Determined to drive her away, Rose had told her mother to kick Laritte out, insisting that her father must have gone mad. She said that girl didn't look like either of them and accused her mother of joking. But her father had only scolded her, saying a proper daughter wouldn't disgrace her father like that. Now that she was an older sister, he said she should set a good example of what it means to be a Brumayer. He declared that the girl's name was Laritte and told Rose to remember it, because from now on, she would be part of their family. Back in the present, Rose slams the table, stands, and walks to her father, urging him not to be angry. Internally, she thinks that the Brumayer's one flaw, Laritte, is finally gone. Now that she's out of their lives, she believes her father will return to normal, and only bright days lie ahead for their family. Trying to lift his mood, Rose tells her father that since they're eating delicious food on a good day, it would be a shame to ruin it with anger. She adds that by now, Laritte must be rotting away in that dusty old shack, all alone in the mountains without help. She says she can't wait for the day that shack is empty again. Meanwhile, Laritte, alive and healthy, is in that very same old shack in the mountains. She's carrying dry firewood to the fireplace to start fire. As she works, she feels her ears burning and wonders if someone might be talking about her. Reflecting on her situation, she notes that the money Count Brumayer gave her was barely anything, just spare change. It was hardly enough to buy firewood. After several tries with a matchstick, she finally gets the firewood to catch and lets out a relieved sigh. She sits down on a nearby rocking chair and recalls how Rose used to mock her for playing in the mountains, saying she looked like a fool. But Rose didn't know anything. Thanks to the Empire's frequent rains, mountain trees don't catch fire easily. Without firewood, Laritte could have frozen to death. Though it's only autumn, the mountain air is already bitterly cold. Laritte marvels at how her childhood experiences, once dismissed and painful to remember, are now actually helping her survive. After some time, she thinks maybe she should eat something. She decides to cook with potatoes, a versatile crop loved by both commoners and nobility. It's lucky she managed to steal a few things before leaving the Brumayer house, a couple of matches and a small stash of spices. She thinks about what to make: potato salad, potato with cream and caviar, potato pizza, gnocchi. But quickly realizes such luxurious dishes are impossible. All she has are a few potatoes and some spices. Settling for a humble but hearty meal, she decides to make roasted potatoes, a classic farmer's dish. She tosses the potatoes into the fireplace and patiently waits for them to cook. When they're done, the simple roasted potatoes look absolutely delicious to her. Suddenly, it occurs to her that she can't afford to just relax. There's too much to be done. There's plenty to clean and repair around the shack. Thankfully, there's a stream nearby, so water isn't an issue. But the most crucial part of survival, she reminds herself, is eating well. And she certainly doesn't have an endless supply of potatoes. Fortunately, the seemingly empty shack holds a treasure more valuable than nobles might ever suspect: its cabinets. While all the valuable tableware and cutlery were taken, the wooden cabinets were left behind. To a commoner, that's real wealth. As Laritte examines the cabinets, she notices their exquisite texture and grain, realizing their high quality. She figures she can trade the wood for at least a month's worth of potatoes. If she divides the wood and sells it piece by piece, it should be more than enough. Now, she just needs to find a way to transport it safely to the village. As she inspects each item one by one, she estimates how many potatoes each could be worth. With this much, she's confident she'll be able to get by until she can find a job. Laritte smiles to herself, realizing that her first step toward independence is looking much more promising than she ever imagined. Laritte, after letting the roasted potatoes cool for a while, picks one up to eat, though it's still hot. The roasted potato will taste great on its own, but she adds the finishing touch by sprinkling some spices on it. She blows on it before taking a careful bite to avoid burning her tongue. As she munches, she's delighted by the soft, warm texture and the crispy, golden brown skin from roasting it directly over the fire. The more she chews, the sweeter it tastes. It's so delicious. She feels like she could eat several more, though she thinks it would have been even better with some milk. Now that she has eaten, all that's left is to find a place to sleep. She plans to have the leftover potatoes for breakfast tomorrow and hopes to enjoy a proper meal for lunch. Maybe she can get some milk from the nearby village. She starts to imagine what tomorrow's dinner might be, but suddenly stops herself, wondering if she's getting ahead of herself. For a moment, she reflects. Has she ever felt this full in a place that felt so warm and safe before? Laritte remembers being abandoned, at 8 years old, when her mother, tired of caring for her, told her she was just a burden and left without looking back. Her mother handed her over to Count Brumayer and disappeared. The Count, recognizing Laritte as his illegitimate daughter, welcomed her warmly and told her to come with him. Laritte had hoped they took her in with good intentions, but her life there was harsh. She was treated poorly and even had to scavenge for her own food. Now, sipping hot tea, Laritte reflects that she's used to such treatment and admits she still doesn't know how to react when something good happens. But things are different now. She finally has a place of her own. With the wood from the shack, she can manage until she finds work. She believes she'll make it through the winter. Thinking about her new hopes and dreams, she feels confident she can overcome her fears. If she takes things one step at a time, she believes she'll slowly adjust and move forward. A few weeks later, Laritte returns to her villa from the village market with a bag full of supplies, reflecting that this is the life she has always dreamed of. The villagers have been incredibly kind, even giving her many items for free. They assured her that as long as the soil doesn't freeze, the seeds they gave her should grow, so Laritte plans to start her vegetable garden sometime this week. With their help, she even managed to get some sugar, and she feels genuinely lucky. Laritte has now stockpiled enough food for the winter, sold a few ornaments, cleared out the bookcase, and cleaned the living room of bugs and spider webs. Though the second floor of the villa still needs work, she's made significant progress. Tired from the long trip, she decides to treat herself to some stew. Tying her hair into a top ponytail, she begins preparing it. First removing the blood from the meat, then peeling potatoes and carrots. She also decides to include bay leaves and pepper, a secret tip shared by the lady at the market, making the simple stew extra special. As Laritte is about to add pepper to her stew, a sudden loud bam startles her, causing her to drop the pepper grinder. Alarmed, she wonders who could be at the door. No one should be visiting her out here. As she picks up the grinder, she anxiously worries that if someone sees she's doing well, they might force her to leave. This house is all she has. The noise fades, and Laritte, walking on tiptoes, cautiously peeks from behind a wall. With everything now silent, she considers that it might have been a wild animal. She recalls seeing a flock of birds on her way back and wonders if a baby bird might have fallen and gotten separated, in need of help. But what if it is a wild animal? Fidgeting nervously, Laritte reminds herself of the promise she made earlier, to help others, just as the villagers had helped her. Steeling herself, she decides to check. Whether it's a baby bird or something else, she has to see what she can do. Laritte slowly opens the door, and to her surprise, finds a cloaked man standing there, breathing heavily. He suddenly stumbles toward her, whispering "Nanny," which makes Laritte freeze in shock. She recognizes him. The man collapses into her arms with a loud groan, and just before losing consciousness, he murmurs, "It wasn't me," still mistaking Laritte for his nanny. Unable to continue holding the man up, Laritte falls flat on her behind, though she manages to keep him from hitting his head on the floor. She moves him to the rocking chair in front of the fireplace and piles every blanket in the house on him to keep him warm. As she looks at his face, a thought strikes her. What was his name again? Technically, she's married to him, but it never occurred to her that he might still be alive. She knows him as Duke Reinhardt, yet oddly, his actual name escapes her. If not for this moment, she likely never would have met him, alive or dead. Laritte soaks her handkerchief in boiling water, wrings it out, and begins wiping the Duke's wounds with it. Since the bed was moldy, she had no choice but to set him down in the chair and focus on keeping the room as warm as possible. She worries internally about her favorite rocking chair, having yielded her precious spot only out of sheer generosity. His body temperature seems to have stabilized, though he still looks unwell. Laritte has done all she can for now. As she continues tending to his wounds, she wonders whether the Duke will survive the night. There's a chance she won't be the first dead body in this house after all. Laritte already resents her family and sees nothing appealing in having a husband. Suddenly, she feels dizzy as a painful memory resurfaces, being falsely accused of stealing Rose's necklace. She had pleaded with her father, insisting she'd never even seen the necklace, but her words were ignored. Instead, she was slapped and beaten for supposedly lying. Setting down the blood-stained handkerchief, Laritte sits on the carpet near the unconscious man and gently touches his hand, questioning whether she'll regret helping someone accused of treason. She softly begs him not to die, admitting she doesn't know what he's been through, but he has to survive. Then, falling silent, she squeezes his hand and rests her face against his knee, reflecting with a pained smile that she's asking him to live when she can't even guarantee her own survival. As the night deepens, Laritte eventually closes her eyes. On the battlefield, victory brings elation as soldiers celebrate the end of the war and the chance to finally return home. One of Duke Reinhardt's subordinates, respectfully calling him, Your Grace, urges him to go rest, saying he'll head back first and wait. The Duke agrees with a sigh of relief, saying they're finally going home. Suddenly, a figure sneaks up behind him. The Duke, sensing the presence, turns and is shocked to see Barthold, one of his subordinates. Calling out his name in surprise, the Duke is then stabbed in the stomach as Barthold apologizes and says he had no choice. The Duke should never have made enemies within the imperial family. Startled, Duke Reinhardt awakens from this nightmare. He jerks upright, causing his wound to flare in pain, and lets out a groan. Looking around, he realizes he's in a familiar place and is relieved he's still alive. But something feels heavy. When he looks down, he sees Laritte sleeping with her head resting on his knee. He silently wonders who she is. He recalls seeing someone before losing consciousness, but the memory is hazy. Reflecting that she wasn't his nanny, he reaches out to gently tuck her hair, noting it isn't gray with age. It seems she saved him, but as long as he's labeled a traitor, he knows he must remain cautious. She could still turn against him. Laritte wakes up to find the Duke awake, and they make brief eye contact. Blinking in surprise, she casually notes that he's sitting in her favorite chair, but at least he didn't turn it into his deathbed, and she thanks God for that. She then asks if he likes stew. Confused, the Duke questions what she just said, prompting Laritte to rephrase. Should she have asked if he's well enough to eat stew? Without waiting for a response, Laritte heads to the kitchen, commenting that he'll eat if he's hungry, ignoring the Duke as he tries to get her to wait. Just then, his wound throbs again, and he lets out a sound of pain. Meanwhile, Laritte closes the door behind her, leaving the Duke astonished. In the kitchen, Laritte calmly prepares the stew step by step and feels satisfied with how it turns out. Back in a room, the Duke groans in pain until he hears a clatter. Laritte is bringing him the stew. Noticing the tray, the Duke remarks, somewhat surprised, that it really is stew. Laritte, hearing that, retorts by asking if there's such a thing as fake stew, silently thinking the Duke is a weird guy. The Duke, calling her miss, questions if they're talking about the same thing. Laritte confirms of course they are and quickly corrects him. She's not a miss. She recently got married. Duke Reinhardt is surprised to hear that Laritte is married. He had assumed she lived in the villa alone. Curious, he wonders what her husband does. As Laritte eats her stew, she notices the Duke hasn't touched his and asks if something is wrong. He replies no, and when she asks if he's going to eat, he says he will. Internally, the Duke sighs, feeling increasingly disoriented with each exchange. He reminds himself that talking to a stranger like this is a waste of time. When he tries to move, Laritte stops him, urging him to stay still. She briefly leaves and returns with a pot of warm water. When he asks what it's for, Laritte explains that his stomach wound looks severe and is likely the cause of his lingering fever. Though she's no medic, she knows early wound care is important. Before she begins cleaning, she warns him to speak up if it hurts and not to hold back. The Duke tries to protest, but Laritte insists that doing this now will make it hurt less later. As she wipes the wound, he groans in pain, his dizziness worsening. He reflects that it's been weeks since he was stabbed. He should have healed by now. He suspects Barthold may have used a poisoned or tainted blade. Laritte encourages him to stay calm and breathe deeply. Seeing him clench his fist tightly, she gently holds his hand to relax it, reassuring him they're almost done and asking him to hang in there a bit longer. The Duke finally exhales in relief and thanks her. Her help has cleared his mind. He then asks what she's doing to his hand. Laritte explains that if he clenches too hard, his nails might cut into his palms, and besides, holding someone's hand is comforting. After finishing the cleaning, she says she'll go get some bandages and instructs him not to move. Once she finishes bandaging the wound, Laritte remarks that it's a shame she doesn't have spare clothes for him, but now that the wound is clean, she doesn't expect the infection to worsen. Meanwhile, Duke Reinhardt decides it's time to end the situation. Since Laritte doesn't know who he really is, it would be best to send her away before things become more complicated. He tells her there's something he needs to clarify. Curious, Laritte encourages him to speak. The Duke asks if she knows what this place is. Laritte confidently replies that it's the Duke's villa. He follows up, asking if she knows who the owner was. Laritte answers that she's technically the owner too. She became the Duke's wife. Confused, the Duke replies, "Pardon?" Laritte explains that although the marriage exists only in name, it's important to her because her claim to the villa depends on it. In that moment, the Duke finally realizes who she is. Some time ago, his nanny and vassals pressured him into accepting a marriage proposal, insisting it was a rare chance. His intimidating demeanor always scared women off. Tired from preparing for war, he impulsively agreed to a random proposal that happened to arrive. If he remembers correctly, the woman's name was Rose Brumayer. He vaguely recalls seeing her once, but never imagined she'd be this eccentric. Realizing now that the husband Laritte mentioned was him, the Duke finds the situation ridiculous and far more complicated than he expected. He asks Laritte if she knows who he is. She nods, thinking to herself that of course she knows. How could she not? Surprised by how easily she admits it, the Duke points out that she's knowingly helped a traitor. Laritte simply replies that it's the truth. Internally, she reflects that even if the Duke did rebel, they're already in the same boat. Whatever happens next, whether he flees or hides here, it makes no difference to her. She adds that plans never go as expected anyway, and acknowledges the house isn't fully hers after all. The Duke grins at her response, silently affirming that she really is a strange person. Leaning back in the chair, feeling drowsy, Duke Reinhardt mumbles that talking to Laritte is exhausting. He reflects on how, just hours ago, he had climbed a mountain to avoid being seen, abandoned as soon as the battle ended. Betrayed by his right-hand man, he could have thought about revenge, but there are too many people who rely on him. In his rush to find them, he now finds himself instead in front of a warm fireplace, having an odd conversation with an even stranger woman. The contrast feels like a bucket of ice dumped over him. With his injuries, he knows he won't be able to do much for a while. He thanks Laritte, though belatedly, for everything. She replies that he can thank her if he survives. She's still not sure he will. Caught off guard, the Duke chuckles and admits he expected her to say something like that. Despite being strangers, the Duke feels as if he's known her for years, or perhaps it's simply the unexpected warmth of a home he thought would be empty. As pain flares from his wound, Laritte covers him with a blanket. Just before sleep overtakes him, he tells her there's something that's been on his mind, and that he'll tell her once he feels better. The day after Duke Reinhardt fell asleep with a high fever, the first snow falls. On her way to the kitchen, Laritte notices the snowfall and realizes she won't be able to plant the seeds she had gotten. She wonders if she can bring some soil inside instead. She begins boiling milk to make tea, and reflects that she hasn't made tea since arriving at the villa. After all, tea doesn't satisfy hunger. However, recalling that nobles in the Ayasa Empire drink tea like water, she assumes the Duke would be the same. She prepares a caramel-colored milk tea, but feels something is missing. Remembering the sugar she brought, she adds a spoonful, thinking tea without sugar is like drinking plain water. Laritte brings the tea to Duke Reinhardt and knocks before entering. The Duke wakes up at the sound of the knock. Laritte asks about his fever, and he says he thinks it's better. Suspicious, Laritte touches his forehead to check and finds his temperature still high. She questions whether he really thinks this counts as better, teasing that he's good at lying and asking if all Dukes are like that. The Duke sighs. Laritte privately notes that he still keeps his manners, even while sick. She tells him sick people don't have to be so polite and asks if he can sit up. She made some milk tea for him. He sits up. Laritte explains she went to the market and bought tea leaves known to reduce fevers and decided to mix them with milk so he could get some nutrients, since he still seems unable to eat solid food. The Duke takes a sip of the tea and reflects that the sweetness makes him feel more alive. He notes how difficult it must have been for Laritte to get milk in the mountains and appreciates her effort. He thanks her for the tea, to which Laritte simply responds with a quiet, She then mumbles that the milk was originally meant for her milk jam but tells him not to worry about it. The Duke is surprised by this and glances nervously at the cup in his hands, silently acknowledging how grateful he is that she's choosing to overlook the fact that he's a traitor. As he carefully drinks the milk tea, Laritte opens the window, saying that although it's cold, they need fresh air, especially when he is sick. Feeling the chill, the Duke asks if it's raining. Laritte, taking his empty cup, replies that it's snowing and notes that the weather has gotten colder lately. The Duke lies back down, and as Laritte pulls the blanket up to cover him, she asks if he dislikes snow. He replies no. On the contrary, he actually likes it, especially watching the snow from this place. Duke Reinhardt reflects on his childhood visits to the villa, a place far from the capital that his mother especially loved for its wildflowers. During her illness, they stayed there for an extended time, and even when unwell, she would take him outside to watch the snow fall. Those moments became unforgettable memories. After her death, it became too painful for him to return, so he ordered the villa to be abandoned. No more cleaning or upkeep. He had wanted the place, so full of memories, to fade with time. After being stabbed, he had no choice but to come back, expecting a decayed, empty structure. Instead, he encountered someone who turned out to be his wife. He now wonders what Count Brumayer was thinking, sending his only daughter alone, without even a maid, to such a place. She does everything herself and spends much of her time with him. Truthfully, He doesn't fear her reporting him. In fact, Duke Reinhardt suddenly feels the urge to confide in her, to tell her that he's been framed and knows how to clear his name. Attempting to rise and speak to her, he stumbles from dizziness and collapses. Hearing the thud, Laritte turns in alarm. Just before he loses consciousness, the Duke sees her rushing to him, clearly worried. After collapsing, Duke Reinhardt has a dream. In it, a younger version of himself hears voices and gets out of bed to investigate. He wonders why the villa feels more crowded than usual, considering it's just him and his wife living there. As he heads downstairs, a maid greets him, saying, "Lord Ian, good morning." Following the voices, Ian enters a room and finds his mother, Selina Reinhardt, who warmly calls his name. Overcome with emotion, Ian runs to her, hugs her tightly, and tells her how much he missed her. Duchess Reinhardt and the two maids in the room are puzzled by his reaction but find him endearing. His mother, confused, asks what's gotten into him and suggests they have breakfast in the dining room. She also mentions having heard that Betty, one of the maids, has prepared something special for them. When Betty offers to bring the food to her room instead, Duchess Reinhardt declines, saying she feels like she can eat a lot today, something she hasn't felt in a while. On the way to the dining room, Betty tells Duchess Reinhardt that the nanny wrote a letter saying she'll return from her vacation tomorrow. Surprised, the Duchess comments that the nanny has more gray hair than before and wonders if it's due to stress. She remarks that the nanny should take a longer break and jokingly asks the maids if Ian has been stressing her out. Ian insists he doesn't cause any trouble. Suddenly, someone with gray hair passes by Ian, causing him to pause. He wonders if it was the nanny, then notices the person reminds him of his wife. This thought confuses him, and he reasons that he must be imagining things. After all, he's still a kid and couldn't possibly have a wife. When his mother asks what's wrong, he replies it's nothing and tells her not to worry. They continue on. At the dining table, Ian and Duchess Selina enjoy their meal until she suddenly spits out her food. The maids become concerned, but she tells them not to fuss, saying it just went down the wrong way. One of the maids notes that the Duchess hasn't been eating well for days and often can't keep food down. Dismissing their concerns, the Duchess rises and says she's going to rest upstairs. Before leaving, she tells Ian to take his time finishing his meal. Worried, Ian watches his mother leave, then quickly finishes his food and rushes after her. As he hurries, he wonders where his mother's favorite rocking chair is, thinking he last saw it in the living room but remembers it's usually in his room. When Ian opens the door to his room, he finds his mother resting in her favorite rocking chair. She expresses surprise at seeing him, and Ian runs to her. She asks if he's already finished eating, and Ian replies that he was just worried about her. She tells him that while she often falls ill, everyone in the villa treats her like she's made of glass. This time, it was simply that the food didn't go down well. Ian says he just wants her to stay healthy for a long time. The Duchess reassures him not to worry. Everyone is taking such good care of her that she couldn't possibly stay sick. She then comments that Ian seems especially childlike today and asks if he needs a hug. She hugs him tightly, prompting Ian to say, "Ack, mother," as the hug is too tight. Just then, the maid Betty knocks and enters with another maid and two cute little girls, bringing medicine to help the Duchess with digestion. They witness Ian being teased by his mother, who smiles warmly at him. All of them rush to her and earnestly ask her to stay healthy for a long time. The Duchess was always elegant and gentle, never imposing strict formalities, which is why the servants sincerely cared for her. Ian deeply wishes moments like this could last forever. Suddenly, he wakes from the dream with teary eyes, thinking to himself that while he had wished for that to continue, the present reality is different. The walls now are cracked and aged with time, and the air around him is as cold as ice. Laritte wishes Ian good morning, and gently wipes away his tears. Ian tries to respond, but is interrupted by a coughing fit. Laritte tells him to stay still and not strain himself. She places her hand on his forehead and realizes that his fever has worsened significantly overnight. Meanwhile, Ian wonders why this woman likes his mother's favorite chair and why she takes care of him so tenderly, just like his mother used to. He questions if that's the reason he keeps thinking about the past. Then, he quietly says that he misses his family. Laritte reflects on the rumors that circulated, that the imperial family had shown mercy to the Reinhardt dukedom for their alleged crimes of treason. They were allowed to keep their family name and the villa. The imperial family spared the employees, though they were scattered across the land. Laritte assumes the duke must have returned to the villa knowing this, and she believes most of his people likely survived. Reaching out, Laritte gently touches Ian's hand and reassures him that she too is now part of the dukedom, so he's not alone. Ian smiles and agrees, saying she's right. To become a sword master, one must first be able to detect magic. Upon realizing that magic can flow through a simple sword, a sword master can begin to change the weapon's appearance, though that is only the beginning of their abilities. In battles between sword masters, the outcome is determined by the amount of magic their sword holds, since they are all already masters of swordsmanship. Beyond this, sword masters must learn to move the energy within their bodies, achieving full control over themselves. This enhances their physical abilities, heightens all 5 senses, and accelerates healing. Even if fatally wounded by a sword forged from dragon bone, they will eventually recover. Which means Ian will too. Laritte returns from the village with some vegetables and stands in the kitchen, wondering what to cook. It's been a week since the Duke arrived, and he seems to be getting better. His fever hasn't returned, and he can now eat soft foods. Laritte decides to make a light vegetable soup, though she wishes she had more ingredients. As she chops vegetables, she looks out the window and notices how cold it's become. Winter has clearly arrived. Realizing she won't be able to travel to the village as often, she considers stocking up the warehouse while the snow is still manageable. Laritte begins cooking by lightly stir-frying leafy vegetables, then adds fermented liquor and spices for extra flavor and aroma. She adds root vegetables to the broth and lets it simmer. Though the soup lacks protein, it will have to do for now. She wishes she had better ingredients, but decides to compensate by adding more of the leftover vegetables. Muttering to herself, Laritte wonders if the soup is enough for one person. Just then, Ian surprises her by saying he'll try his best to eat it all. Startled, Laritte remarks that he got up by himself, which amuses Ian. He's proud to have managed it, though he notes Laritte doesn't seem too thrilled. She responds that if he's well enough to joke, he must be improving. Ian says he felt strong enough to walk when he woke up and catches the smell of the soup, silently thinking how good it smells. When he asks what it is, Laritte tells him it's soup and reassures him he'll have no trouble eating it. Ian offers to help, but Laritte pokes him near his wound, making him groan. She tells him there's no way he can help anyone in his condition, not anytime soon. Still wincing, Ian says she could have just said so without poking him. Suddenly, Ian pauses and asks if she just laughed. Laritte says she did. Ian goes quiet for a moment, surprised. Laritte asks if he thought she couldn't laugh. As Ian fumbles for a response, she cuts him off and tells him to come over and eat. They eat together, and Ian finishes his entire bowl. Laritte, delighted, beams at him, praising him for cleaning his plate. Ian thanks her, saying it was delicious. Internally, he reflects that although he said he'd try his best, he hadn't been sure he could finish it. The soup wasn't made with fancy ingredients, but he could feel the care and time she put into it. A strange emotion rises. He wants to tell her he loved it, but the words won't come. He silently curses his tongue for failing him. Laritte, pleased, begins thinking about what she might cook next. Meanwhile, Ian sees a chance to help and stands with his plate, asking what he should do with the dishes. Laritte questions his intent, and Ian immediately understands. She's warning him that if he insists, she'll poke his wound again. Defeated, he sits back down, admitting to himself that he's not much help in his current state. Laritte tells him she'll be back after washing the dishes and leaves. Alone, Ian reflects that he had thought the only chair on the first floor was the rocking chair, and realizes Laritte must have brought the others down from the dusty second floor. Frustrated, he knows he has to recover soon if he wants to be of use to her. He pulls out a necklace and thinks that maybe it's the only other way he can be of help.